regular meeting of the Board of Education is called to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mr. Acom,
Here.
Mrs. Click,
Here.
Mrs. Schneider,
Here.
Mrs. Mahalis.
Here.
Mr. Cebulski.
Here.
Right, we'll begin our meeting tonight with special reports and recognitions. We have 2 high school students being recognized as Rotary Students of the Month. May I have a motion for approval?
Moved.
Second.
Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Click,
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski,
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis.
Yes.
Mr. Acom,
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider.
Yes.
All right, would Savannah Brown and Leo Cesaraj please come up and get your certificates and then make your way to the podium. All right, Mr. Hayes and Mr. Torres, please introduce the students.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Mahalis and the Board of Education for allowing us to shed a little bit of light on 2 amazing seniors here at Aurora High School. First and foremost, I'm going to let Mr. Torres introduce Savannah Brown. He has a little bit of a special connection to the Brown family and previously worked with them.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Victor Torres. I serve as one of 2 assistant principals at the high school, as well as the 612 Special Services Coordinator. This evening, I have the honor to shine the spotlight on AHS senior Savannah Brown. Now, this is especially wonderful for me because I have had the opportunity to work with Savannah's mom for the Bedford City Schools for a couple of years before making my transition to Aurora. So with that said, I'd like to share a few sentiments that some of Savannah's teachers shared during the nomination process. Science teacher Mrs. Watt says, "Savannah is an old soul. She brings a vibrant energy to the classroom. One thing I love about Savannah is her knowledge and love of the theater. She lights up talking about different shows and roles to play. In many ways, it speaks to her persona in the class, where she is able to adapt to any script or role thrown her way. She always seems to know just what is needed to fit into the classroom dynamics like the star of the show. She brings a calm and quiet energy to the room, but manages to stand out in every way. Whether she is behind the scenes or center stage, I can say I'm honored to have Miss Brown as a student." Choir director Ross Downing says, "Savannah Brown may very well be the best student musician at Aurora. In addition to being a star in band on multiple instruments, even serving as the drum major for this year, she is also a star student in the choir program. She is involved in concert band, jazz band, concert choir, CVME, and stage crew for our musicals. Somehow, she manages to balance all of these commitments with ease. She is well versed in both piano and music theory, she dabbles in music composition, and she demonstrates an excellent balance of leadership and humility in the classroom. She'd be an asset to any school's music program, and we are beyond lucky to have her here at Aurora. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce to you Savannah Brown."
Hello. I'd like to start off by thanking the Rotary Club, its members, and the Board of Education for the honor of getting chosen for this award. Of course, I wouldn't be here without the support of my parents. I want to thank them for always encouraging me to get involved at school and pushing me to be the best that I can. I'd also like to thank my grandparents who are here today for their love and support. Throughout high school, I've tried to get as involved in the music department and theater as much as I could, participating in set crew, joining choir, and getting as involved with band as possible. Whether it be playing alto saxophone in jazz band, marimba and percussion ensemble, or clarinet during class, I always put my best effort forward into whatever new activity I'm trying. The past few years, I've had the opportunity to interact with the younger band members through Harmon Night, and I enjoyed volunteering to help guide students during summer band. For the past 2 years, I have also led the marching band as drum major, learning leadership and confidence as my experience grew. Along with my commitment towards music, I am also passionate about the outdoors and preserving our environment, goals that I find reflected in the Rotary Club's mission. This past spring, I loved getting to help mulch the Tree Museum at Hartman Park to commemorate Arbor Day through the Rotary Club of Aurora. I admire the work that the Rotary Club is doing throughout the world to improve sustainability, support education, and conserve the environment. Ever since I joined Girl Scouts and went to camp, I have loved helping clean up our parks and teach others about nature. I got to put these skills to use the past few summers, working as an archery instructor at a nearby summer camp and sharing all the information I knew about the outdoors with the younger generation with the hopes that they will also learn to love our planet. The experience I gained at camp develops my character and taught me the leadership, teamwork, and work ethic I have used to become successful in school. I realized that my passion for the outdoors could be actualized into a career my freshman and sophomore year of high school during honors and AP biology with Mrs. Biro. During by far my favorite class, I saw how our environment interacted from the smallest molecules up to whole organisms working together to create our world. I never could have gotten to where I am today without taking that challenging yet formative class. After I graduate, I plan on going to college, and while I haven't committed to a certain one yet, I am looking into Colorado College. There I hope to study organismal biology and ecology. I also plan to continue to pursue music as a hobby by arranging songs and playing in campus ensembles. In the future, I'm not certain where my path will lead me, but I am sure to do my best to advocate for our park systems and maybe play some music while I'm at it. Once again, I'm extremely grateful for this tremendous honor, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Savannah. And next, it's my honor to recognize Leo Sesharaj, and I could go on and on about how wonderful he is, but I'll just share a few sentiments from some of his teachers. Savannah brought up Ms. Biro, who talked about Leo in this regard, saying, although I'm not currently teaching him this year, I had Leo for 2 years during both his freshman and sophomore year. He's one of the most dedicated, focused, and most resilient students whom I've ever had. He works tirelessly to be successful, and if anyone tells him that he's not capable of taking a tough class or accomplishing something really difficult, he doubles down and does it anyway. In the meantime, he's a wonderful, caring, and attentive human being who gets along with everyone in the school and cares deeply about his peers. English teacher Melissa Lindley said, Leo's bright smile and engaging demeanor positively impact his group interactions in the classroom. He's also phenomenal at using feedback to grow as a sincere learner. And finally, Mr. Raycow, math teacher, said, and computer science teacher as well, said that Leo is not only a diligent and intelligent student, he is a strong leader in and out of the classroom. He asks great questions and volunteers to put problem solutions on the board, furthering the understanding of the entire class. When asked to work collaboratively, he keeps his group focused and ensures that all members have a voice and emerge with greater understanding. And I can tell you personally, having gotten to know Leo for the past 4 years, he's served on interview committees for me. He's been on the Superintendent's Advisory Council. He was previously a Visionary Student of the Year for embodying all of our competencies or roots that we have displayed over here as our district's mission and vision. During COVID, he aced his classes from afar while in India. He's just an absolutely tremendous person, learner. He also tried out for his the graduation speech last week, and he was outstanding. So he's a true culturizer in our building. He's a wonderful person. He makes me want to be a better educator and human being. And ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Leo Sesharaj.
I'm surprised to say it's already evening, but good evening. As you may know, my name is Leonel Sesraj. I'm incredibly honored to be standing among you here today as a recipient of the Rotary Student of the Month. Firstly, I want to express my deepest gratitude to the Rotary Club and the Aurora board members for their continued dedication to serving the betterment of this school district. Your efforts have made our educational opportunities unparalleled to other communities and have set the Aurora students apart from other communities. Shout out also to Mr. Hayes, Mr. Roberto, Mr. Milsitich. Without their contributions, I don't think I would be able to stand here today. I believe my family, my main motivators, and my sideline cheerleaders also deserve significant acknowledgement. With them here today, I reflect their dedicated, unwavering support and encouragement. From their motivational words during times of challenge to their consistent urge to get me out of bed, my family has been my rock and greatest source of strength. When I reflect on what this honor represents, I'm reminded of what the core values for this award entail: integrity, service beyond self, and the drive to make a positive impact on society. These values resonate within me, and I serve to embody them daily. Within school grounds, I'm a member of the National Honor Society and Interact Club. Within my participation in both clubs, I've delved into various forms of community service, ranging from packaging lunches at Silver Creek Church to spending 4.5 hours in an Aladdin costume for the elementary school princess prom. Outside of school, I've been on leadership committees for a Toastmasters International organization based in Twinsburg, and I'm also an active participant of the National Boy Scouts of America. Recently, I've earned the rank of Eagle Scout after a 6-month service project behind the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church here in Aurora. My times of service to the community have not only fueled my motivation for societal betterment, but also from the appreciation I have from the opportunities that I have been given. As a requirement for the Boy Scout Order of the Arrow ordeal, I had to haul my 30-pound bag for 4 miles and then proceed to sleep on the cold, bare ground with nothing other than a wet sleeping bag and a ground mat. From these experiences, I've not only learned to value the dedication and tenacity, but I've learned to sympathize for those unfortunate, further fueling me in my acts of service. In my time at Aurora High School, I've come to love several classes and subjects. If I had to choose a favorite class, I literally couldn't. But I can tell you it's between AP Bio or AP Computer Science. Both courses challenged me beyond what I can express, and both have given me moments of joy and satisfaction. They've influenced me so much, they became the core debate for my future major in college. Pre-med or computer engineering, the debate of the century. With an offer at Purdue's College of Engineering and Ohio State's College of Arts and Sciences, I'm left in a dilemma. As of now, computer engineering is in the lead, but pre-med is still on the back burner. As I conclude today, I remind myself of the responsibility that this recognition has brought me. It's not only a past accomplishment, but a call to action to continue my acts of service and broaden my dedication for making a positive impact on society. I once again thank you all for this honor and for your belief in me. Thank you.
Thank you, Savannah and Leo, for those excellent, inspiring speeches. Next, we will move to hearing of the public. This period of the board meeting is allocated to hearing public comments on both agenda and non-agenda items. The board and administration do not respond at board meetings to questions from the audience, nor will we comment. Individuals wishing to comment should have registered on the comment sign-up sheet that was placed at the entrance to the board meeting. The public comment period is a maximum of 30 minutes, and each speaker will be limited to a total time of 3 minutes. The board treasurer will keep the time, and each person addressing the board is requested to provide his or her name upon being recognized, and the treasurer will include that information in the board meeting minutes. So we'll start tonight with Andrew Straight. Want to come up to the podium? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Members of the board, my name is Andrew Straight. I am currently the boys JV soccer coach here at Aurora. I have been coaching here at Aurora for 5 years. My first year was with Jason Bibza, and once he stepped down, Ryan Connor took the helm, and I've been coaching with him ever since. I believe you guys are all aware of the petition that has been spread around for Coach Connor to be let go or have his contract not reinstated. I just want to give my personal opinions on the whole situation as someone who's seen everything firsthand. As far as I can say, over these past 4 years with Ryan, I've had nothing but positive experiences with the program, not only with Ryan, but with all the parents, with all of the students, with all of the administration. It's been nothing but a pleasure for me. I never coached at the high school level until I got to Aurora, and I really didn't understand how much goes into what it takes to create a great program. Not just a great program, a great culture. And I believe Ryan Connor is the right man for this job here. There were several things that were put into the petition that I found to be either completely untrue or fabricated in ways. Now, our goal is to create the best possible sports experience possible for these kids, and we understand that it may fall short for some, but for the vast majority, I believe that we are doing a great job, and that's being led by Coach Connor. We do so much, there's so much more that goes into coaching than just the X's and O's on the field. It's the things that happen on the sidelines, you know, in the classrooms, in the meetings, all the behind-the-scenes stuff that we have so much support from, not only through you guys, but through the administration, through these parents that are here as well, and the players too, who all buy in and, you know, work their butts off for us. I just want to say, there are many things that were, like I said, were thrown around that I just don't agree with or don't find to be true. There's obviously people who, you're right to have different opinions than what the coaching staff makes and believes. But at the end of the day, what we want as a coaching staff, and I know for a fact that what Coach Connor wants, is the best possible experience for these kids. And he is a straight, direct forward coach. He tells you how it is. He doesn't sugarcoat it. Now, for some kids that could be tough. For others, they can handle it. But that's part of what creates a good program and what makes a great coach. Now, I've learned so much through Ryan. I see him more as just a colleague, someone I coach with. He's a friend of mine. I had never met him until he came in 4 years ago. Had no idea what he was about. In these past 4 years, getting to learn Ryan as a coach, but more importantly, Ryan as the person, as the man. He is someone that really represents, I think he represents this school district well. I think he represents our program well. If you look at just this last season alone, I know this last season.
3 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate your time, board.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, next we have Christopher, and I'm sorry, I don't know the last name. Can you? Savukas, okay, Christopher Savukas. Would you state your address, please, and then you can.
155 St. Andrews Lane. Good evening, everybody. I'm Christopher Savukas. I'm currently a sophomore enrolled at Aurora High School. I've now been a part of the soccer program for 2 years as a sophomore, and I can confidently say that the program has been in a great spot with Coach Ryan Connor leading the program, and it would benefit us greatly for him to continue to be the coach, because he has taught us many lessons, such as leadership and resilience. Thank you.
Thank you. And then third is Ryan Connor.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. I am up here speaking. I'm Ryan Connor. Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate that. I love you, man. I'm up here because 4 months ago, a group of parents sent a petition to the administration to have me removed as coach after a really great season where we thought, you know, year 4, Andy and I have been together 4 years trying to build this program and our culture, and it was such a phenomenal season on the field, off the field, and all the players said at the end of the season, and we felt really good about it, and I was just blindsided by this petition. And what's sad about it is it accused me of some terrible things that I've never been accused of, like being abusive. And so that was 4 months ago, and here we are 4 months later, and I've been slandered, I've had my name dragged through the mud, I've been lied about. That petition was so despicable, I immediately called my assistant coaches because I go, guys, you've been with me by my side through all of this, and just help me out here. I don't get this. I don't understand where this is coming from. And we went through every bullet point, and they just refuted everything in there, and they wrote a rebuttal, which you all have, of how almost the entire document is lies and distortion and mistruths. And anybody today can say whatever they want with no facts, no evidence to back it up, and that's kind of what's happened. And that was 4 months ago, and I kind of just stood by. I allowed the superintendent and the AD to do the investigation. It's been going on for 4 months. This program's been on hold for 4 months, and just trying to let the investigation take its course. Having these things being said about me publicly at every chance, and even at a board meeting, and to anybody who would listen about these terrible things about me being abusive. And I guess I don't understand, at no point have these parents ever come up with one thing in the past 4 months. No players come forward with anything concrete or tangible of an incident or something happened. And I have coaches who have stood by my side. You're basically, if you're accusing me, you're accusing them and indicting them as well, because they've stood right by my side and have never seen this. So if that's the case, and then I also guess I just don't understand, you know, if no players or parents and nothing's come, there's no evidence, there's nothing's come, then to me, it should be a unanimous vote of confidence for me and that you believe in me. I've been here for 4 years. There's never been one person who's going to administration that I've mistreated a player. I've been an educator for 28 years, coached for 30 years, high school for 25. And in that time, I don't have one issue. There's not one time where someone's gone to administration that I mistreated a player. Paul didn't even believe me when I told him that. And I'm being honest. I said, it's because of how I treat my players and I run my program. I love these guys. I got guys right over there. I love you guys. And I would do anything for these guys. And the hardest part is being accused of these terrible things when I know they're not true. They know they're not true. My coaches know they're not true. And it's sad today when anybody can say anything they want without any facts or evidence or anything to support it. And I got to have to deal with this for 4 months, and this program's been put on hold for 4 months. I hope you take into account all the letters you got on my behalf. You take into account these young men who showed up here today, my assistant coaches who also written letters on my behalf. I really appreciate you take that all into account when you make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, we will take a break now for a minute or two for those of you who would like to leave before we get into the business portion of our meeting. Welcome to stay, but you're welcome to go. Would you, we'll pass that down to Bill later if you just sit up there, we'll not get it. Oh, okay, thank you. All right, we will move on now to the regular business portion of our meeting. Starting with the approval of minutes from the organizational meeting of January 8th and the regular meeting of January 22nd. We have a motion to approve.
Move.
Second.
Are there any comments, additions to those minutes? Nelson, please call the roll.
Mr. Cebulski,
Yes.
Mrs. Click,
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis, Mr. Akin.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Mahalis. Over the last few weeks, we've held several meetings and made much progress in gathering information from both the staff and the community concerning potential construction of the new high school. Then Design Architecture, or TDA, met with our high school instructional leaders as well as our high school staff to gain their perspective on the general square footage and preliminary layout of the building. They also met with Harmon, Layton, Craddock, and Miller staffs in order to gather their input on potential renovations that would be needed or desired in order to best transition to a different building once the new high school is constructed. The construction committee, which is a team of the ACSD administrators and TDA staff, have been reviewing this data in order to gather new ideas and discuss feasibilities. We've also recently met with 2 community groups to roll out what I call the 20,000-foot view of the master plan. It's a little more in focus than the 30,000-foot view overall, but still very general in scope. And so the 2 groups were the Superintendent's Advisory Council, which have been meeting with me for over the past 3 years to discuss various school-related topics. And the second is the New Construction Steering Committee, which was formed to focus exclusively on the potential new construction. Now, both groups will serve as a sounding board for the potential new construction and as a liaison to the various groups the members represent, which include students, parents, classified and certified staff, administrators, school partners such as PTO and boosters, community partners such as Rotary and the City Council, community members, the alumni, parents of graduates who no longer have kids in the district, and members of targeted developments from around Aurora. So needless to say, it is an eclectic group by design so that we will be able to collect a variety of opinions. Now, I thought it would be important to share the general topics that these 2 community groups discuss with the board and to provide some of their initial thoughts and feedback. Now, TDA first shared the general plan of this project, including the overview, as you can see here, of the campus that it would create for the next, I should say, generation of Greenman to come to Aurora. On the far right-hand side, which is the south side, based on this orientation of the screen, you can see the pink, and pink is Miller, which is going to be an all kindergarten building after this move would be made. Layton in blue would include pre-K in the wing closest to the parking lot there, and first and second grades. Crossing Aurora Hudson and following Greenman Way to the orange building, that's Harmon, which will become an intermediate school, and grades 3 through 5 would be held there. The old high school, shown in yellow, would be the new middle school, and the portion that you see in red would be where the board offices would be held. So that leaves then the field in the middle where the black dot is. That would be the location of the new high school. So TDA also shared that a traffic study had been completed, and we're waiting on that report. And as a result, they created a tentative layout of the traffic along with a preliminary footprint of the new high school, which you can see here. We are very careful to say that this footprint was a preliminary draft, as you can see across the front of it, because we needed to have a starting point for the discussion, but we do expect there will be several changes before these plans are finalized. Just as a quick orientation, north is now at the top, so the top of the screen would be where the old high school would be. On the right-hand side, or the east side, is where the stadium would be. At the bottom are the tennis courts and Harmon parking lot. And then on the left-hand side, or the west side, would be that field that is right next to the Woods development. So you can kind of see from the breakdown, the academic side is separated from the community-facing part of the building, such as the fine arts and the athletics. Closest to the stadium, we have gymnasiums and locker rooms planned, and the auditorium. This will be nice, for example, with the football, soccer, and other sports that are at the stadium. They'll be able to walk right out of the stadium into the locker rooms and then back a little bit closer than what the current high school would be. The middle portion, you can see the officers with the secure front entryway. So anybody coming into the front of the building where it says administration there in the middle would come through a secure vestibule there and walk in then to the middle, which would be the commons portion of that. They could go to if they're walking straight in, they could go to their left over to the gymnasium and auditorium, or to their right into the academic part. So the academic part could be closed off for after hours, which was, is a nice advantage to that model. And initially we have you can see there, 2 floors in a courtyard as is set up right now. One thing of note is the blue service area at the bottom there, the HVAC. That's facing away from the woods, which was by design, because that was one of the things that some folks were concerned about there. So again, just starting to take into account some of those concerns. Traffic, as I mentioned, is tentatively included for drop-off areas with cars in the front and buses in the back, but we've already had discussions about that being changed up as we do that, as you'll see. So after seeing these drafts in the campus, TDA then asked each of these groups to respond to these 4 questions that you see up there. And though I won't share all the responses, I do want to touch upon some of them so you get an idea of what the community was thinking or is thinking. So concerning the overall master plan, there was a lot of people like the idea of being one campus, which allows room to grow in each of the buildings that are going to be part of that, 5 buildings on campus. There are concerns, though, about parking and the practice fields, which was where the the new high school would be built. They like that the new building will be close to the stadium for the access, as we talked about, but they do have concerns about how far, or how close, I should say, it will be to the woods on the other side of the field. And they noted that we need to be sure that the campus is walkable, so sidewalks and pathways and things like that, because if it's to have a true campus feel, is one of the things that was brought up. If they had thoughts about the traffic flow, I did mention already we're looking to potentially change some of the things that are there, but they did have questions about the bus drop-off in terms of its location. They like the idea of the potential of one-way traffic during drop-off. That will help, they believe. And we talked about a potential of putting a traffic circle by where the tennis courts are, where there's a kind of a 3-way, just nobody knows when to stop or not stop right now. We need a officer Trito or Clegg there. And then they hope that we can address some of the traffic at other buildings across the campus. For example, the Layton drop-off is something that we're hoping we can address as well. And then the third question, are there any other considerations? So one of the things that was noted is that there's not a pool in that particular plan. And then when we mentioned a cost of about $13 million as a pool to add on, that conversation didn't go too far after that. They did not necessarily like the idea of the courtyard and discuss potential alternative plans to that in terms of not the greatest space, use of space. And there was discussion about a 2-story versus a 3-story building, which could, again, help to change the footprint as well. One thing that was pointed out is if you do have those west-facing windows, that they're limited to maybe even none, depending on how the buildings are set up, because that faces the development, the woods development, so something to be taken in account. And then we did confirm, they wanted confirmation that the capacity of the new high school would account for the expected growth from that point, which it does. So sharing that and getting some of those feedback, we then finish up talking about the timeline, and you can kind of see in the middle, although if your eyes are better than mine, you can. But I will tell you what it says, that the tentative timeline with both of the groups, we currently are in the feedback stage, if you're looking at February and running into March of 2024. We're looking to have community meetings in April, and then a final scope and cost at the end of May, so at the end of the school year is what we're shooting to be able to share that with the board. And hopefully to have potential board approval in June and July. And then as you can see up there, that last section, the bond campaign running from August through November with the goal of having the November 2024 bond issue on the ballot. So that's the overall piece that we did. We ran through that in about an hour. It was great feedback. We plan to have more meetings with these groups, but we thought we'd give you that initial timeline and then have any time for questions from the board. So the last I heard, and I know Mike serves on the committee, they were still looking into the idea of the rec center. I know the one thing that we would need to do is split that cost, and I don't know that they have $7 million laying around. We don't, but that's something we could potentially work with. Mike, I don't know if you've had any updates about the rec center and where it's at. I know Ann mentioned at the State of the City, it's still, being discussed.
It's still in development. There's they have some preliminary plans developed in different phasing, but the committee is pretty unanimous that no action should be taken until the schools know what direction they're going to go. And so, but a remaining question that I have is similar to yours. May there be opportunities in there to partner with the city? I don't know. Those discussions haven't happened yet.
One of the community members also asked about the potential partnering with like a SUMA or an outside group, something like that. So that's something that we can definitely take a look at with that. But that that is a challenge because if you remember, Paul talked about partnering with that outside group with the cybersecurity, and we've been kind of striking out with that. So it's hard to find partners.
Within that timeline, will there be any more opportunities for community feedback? I know one of the concerns that some people have said or that you hear is that with the levy in November being so close, that the concern about the cost of the high school seems to be something that some community members want to address more.
Yeah, on the timeline, just kind of so you can kind of see as a reference. Yeah, we are going to have in April, there will be about, similar to the last time, 2 or 3 community opportunities to provide that feedback before we bring the final scope and sequence back to the board. And then if the board does approve to go forward, then those last 3 months, August, September, and October, we will have multiple events where TDA is talking about getting some renderings to see, so we get a little bit more of a picture of what we're looking at, The traffic study will be done in terms of the campus outline, as well as the walkways and things like that. And then they've even talked, and this would be really neat if that's the case, to be able to kind of do like a little flyover and a 3D into the buildings just to get a general feel. Of course, all that needs to be, the inside of the building needs to be planned once approved. But we think that August, September, October, there'll be lots of opportunity as well to see what it is that people are going to vote for. Or against. I need to stay neutral, sorry.
Are there, what type of community event? Like, are they going to be more of like the open houses that were
Yeah.
in the previous?
Yeah, they'll be like right here, and we'll get the word out to people so that anybody can come at any point. They can come multiple times, that sort of thing, so that no one would have an opportunity to miss anything if they've got another event.
Will there be opportunities for virtual events as well?
I'm sure we could set that up, yeah, because that's not hard in terms of being able to set up a Chromebook so that they can kind of ask. And, you know, if the need be, Bill and I held a couple of luncheons last time, which actually, you know, it wasn't super attended, but the people who attended appreciated it, and it wasn't really that, much of a burden on us to be able to just share the story a little bit.
Have there been discussions with the city department as far as, getting approved for zoning, or is that?
So TDA is in contact, they'll be in contact with the city, because there's that conversation about if that third story becomes something that we're interested in, that would be definitely a conversation. They'll also, besides the traffic study, they'll be doing soil samples and all the other things, water, runoff, retention, things like that. Good questions. Anything else that's hitting you? Okay. Yes, and because we knew there might be some questions that I'd take a little longer, Paul yielded his time to me, so that's the end of our reports.
Thank you, Mrs. Mahalis. This evening I have two different resolutions for your consideration, and we'll start with the financial report, that being for the month of January. And in January, our expenditures exceeded revenues by nearly $2.7 million, decreasing our general fund cash balance to about $8.2 million. This will be kind of our low point for the year, as January typically is, before we start receiving our tax settlements in advances in February and final settlements in March and April. For January, revenues are about 6% greater than projected, and expenditures about 0.25% less than projected. On the revenue side, the main things to talk about, in all other operating revenue, received about $135,000 in all-day kindergarten tuition. So this is the second half of the tuition for the students attending this year. And we also received nearly $30,000 in preschool tuition. So again, the second half of that. In March, then, we'll receive the first half for next year as kindergarten registration starts to move along here next month. Also, our casino revenue of $94,630 was received. We receive this twice a year, in January and also in August. And in August, it was $101,000, so gambling was down, or maybe winning was up for the gamblers. So, but nearly the same cost. On the expenditure side, expenditures are all pretty much running within normal variances. So thus far for the fiscal year, revenues are about $28,000 greater than projected. Expenditures about $100,000 less, gives us a favorable variance of about $133,000 7 months into the fiscal year.
Moved.
Second.
Mrs. Mahalis, Mr. Acom,
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Click,
Yes.
Mr. Sobolski.
Yes.
And then the second resolution is D2, so this is our resolution, the longest named resolution that we'll have for the year. And what we're doing, we're accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax rates and certifying them to the county auditor. So this is all part of the budgeting process starting for next school year. You remember in January, we passed the alternative tax budget, which we then pass on to the county auditor. In the meantime, the valuations for the district are set and approved at the state level for, each of the counties. And based upon that, the tax rates are set at the Portage County auditor for this year. With the abstract, they send those to us, and basically all we're doing, we're approving what they have sent to us. Things to look at for 2023, our total valuation increased by nearly $34 million, so about 4%. It's a non-reappraisal year in Portage County, so there's not, major increases, though Summit did have an increase there. Next year, you'll see a lot larger one because it's a reappraisal year. Portage County 2024 is the reappraisal year, so we're probably going to see valuation increases in excess of about 20%. An important thing to remember here, with the effective millages for all school for homeowners increased by 5.1 mils. Remember, we passed a 5.9 mil levy in November, so it actually went up less than the amount of new millage that was passed. The 5.9 mil levy passed in November is now down to about 5.8 mils. And all of the other levy millages also dropped. So our total millage, including bond and PI, along with all the general fund millages for homeowners, is now 46.7 mils. Commercial industrial, you can see it's increased by 5.9. It should be increased, not decreased, by 5.9 mils. But the major portion of our valuation is residential. Our commercial and industrial pretty much stays relatively the same. And so for the commercial industrial portion, total millage is 57.2 mils. And that's kind of an explanation of this resolution.
Move.
Second.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Concludes my report.
Moved.
Second.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes. Move.
Second.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Moved.
Second.
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Second.
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Move.
Second.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Exhibit E1B5 is a resolution to employ support staff. May I have a motion, please?
Moved.
Chair seconds. Any comments or questions? Mr. Lawson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Exhibit E1B6 is a resolution to employ long-term substitute teachers. May I have a motion, please?
Moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Lawson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Exhibit E1B7 is a resolution to employ support staff substitutes for this current school year. May I have a motion, please?
So, second.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Lawson, please call the roll.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Exhibit E1B8 is a resolution to approve the introductory equipment of support staff. May I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Lawson, please call the roll.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Exhibit E1B9 is a resolution to award supplemental activity contracts for non-district personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Chair seconds. Any comments or questions?
I'm actually having trouble with this recommendation, and I'd like to make a motion to postpone.
You need to table this motion.
I think it is postponed because are you asking for it to be not tonight to talk?
Not tonight.
So it's postponed.
Postpone.
Second.
I'd like to discuss that for a minute. Mr. Ryan, want to do that?
I think for confidentiality reasons, I think we should meet again in executive session to further discuss and follow up with the last meeting that we had had.
All right. And you said at the beginning you're not comfortable with the recommendation. All right, I would like to say for the record, that it is a board member's responsibility to approve or not approve the recommendations as given to us by the superintendent. When a recommendation is contested in any way, then it is the board member's responsibility to review that and to feel confident that the rationale is sound behind the recommendation. And, I feel that it is, and so I would have been ready to vote tonight. But having said that, if no one else has any comments, we'll take a vote and postpone.
I'm just asking for more time.
All right. Mr. Morrison, please call the roll.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Akam?
No.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Resolution is postponed. Exhibit E1B10 is a resolution to award supplemental contracts to district personnel. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Morrison, please call the roll.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Exhibit E1B11 is a resolution to approve a revised pay rate. May I have a motion for approval?
Moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? I did promise to vote on this. Would you mind just?
Yes. Yeah, so this is a situation where we have, a shortage of bus drivers here and there, and sometimes we have to ask our dispatcher, and sometimes even the supervisor, to stay over extra or come in early to run the buses. When that happens, and they're doing us this favor, they're actually having to take a pay cut because it's called a blended rate. So they would take the substitute bus driver rate and their regular rate and take a blend between those two. So as an example, our transportation dispatcher makes around $26.25 an hour. Substitute bus drivers around $20.55. So just to make it easy math, let's say 25 and 20. So if she typically makes 25, to do us a favor, the bus substitute is 20, so she would only be making $22.50. So it's a difference of a couple dollars, but she's doing us a favor and she's taking a pay cut. And so it's not too much for us financially to instead pay her regular rate rather than the blended rate. And that's the rationale behind this recommendation, if that makes sense.
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Move.
Second?
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Delay $2.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Moved. Second?
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Moved.
Second.
I do have one question about the license fee, because it says it for like 3 years. Does that, at the end of that 3 years, does the cost repeat at that like 3rd year, or is the cost go, like, does the license have to renew?
What happens after the 3rd year and the program is completely established with all 3 years in place, there's an ongoing fee that's the $15,000 license fee and not any of the other fees. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis? Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we went back to its original form. This actually first was brought to the board's attention May 12th of 2023. So in doing that, we went back to the original form, which was 3 consecutive years. And then there also are some things in there that we have since, between our discussions, have decided that we would do a little bit differently than what this original form. But because it's a discussion, we thought we'd start with what that original form was. So we took this form from, we looked at local high schools, Solon, Chagrin Falls, and Kenston. This one is really very, very similar to Kenston's. Felt like that was a great place to start. The 2 things I wanted to bring to your attention, based on some of the things over the last decisions we've made over the last couple of months, would be under B2, where it says the club cannot receive any monetary support from the school. Something to consider, we are supporting lacrosse as one example. So we might change that for a discussion, that cannot receive any monetary support from the school beyond what the school agrees to commit to, something like that. And then number 4, no uniforms will be provided to students. That, again, could potentially be modified to no uniforms will be provided to students by the school unless games will be scheduled. Again, because sometimes clubs don't have games and things like that. That's up to the board, but I threw those out as 2 things that since this was very first introduced back in 2023, we have modified.
What sort of evidence do you have to support the reason for 1 versus 2 versus 3 years for how long it should be a club sport, other than what other districts do near us?
As you just mentioned, the other districts kind of use that as a term. We have, from our past experience, we haven't had a policy like this, but we will say to have, 1 year, you need to have at least 2 for consistency. Now 3 is a trend. And so that's kind of how we're looking at that from there. But that's, again, part of the discussion piece to figure out what makes sense for us. I will say that one of the things we do need to be sure is that during those times, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, that the club can hit all the kind of key markers, or else that does start over, which is, I think, an important part of this policy.
This was discussed once, I think. Paul, didn't you do some research into model policies and found were there patterns in whether it was 1, 2, or 3 years?
Well, it wasn't just me, it was Paul Powers, myself, Mike Roberto, and the athletic council. And there were patterns, and Paul, you can jump in here if you want, but it seemed like 2 to 3 years were the norm. Is that correct, Paul Powers?
It's important to have a club. This policy in place is what you're reiterating. Yeah.
Yeah, so back at the end of January, Jen and I attended the OSBA Board 101 training on January 27th and 28th in Cleveland. It was nice not having to go to Columbus for that. But we just wanted to share very briefly and then perhaps discuss more with our fellow board members some of the more in detail some of the stuff that we talked about in the different sessions. But some of the sessions that I thought were extremely helpful as a new board member coming on was what effective boardmanship means, leadership strategies, how important it is to develop and promote the mission and vision of a school district, the strategic plan, and having policies in place to support that. So I really appreciated kind of getting an opportunity to look at that and what we as a community are already doing. Another session focused on effective communication strategies with the community and between board members, and so I think that was extremely helpful, and I look forward to talking about some of those communication strategies moving forward.
Some of the other resources that OSBA offers, they had told us about evaluation tools that we can use, as well as policy revision and resources to do that, and as well as just OSBA sponsored trainings throughout the year, which might be something we want to look into as well.
Yes.
I attended, some of us attended the State and City Convention this last week, and Mr. Burrow gave an excellent speech, and I wonder if you have touted the schools, I wonder if you would send your speech to us.
Yeah.
So that those of you can take it. Anything else? With that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Mr. Dawson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Click?
Yes.
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?